Hello, YouTube. Friends, BitChute friends, possibly. I keep saying BitChute. I may upload on BitChute again. I'm just going to wing this one today, sticking out my head again for some commentary. It's been a while. It's been a while. A lot has happened for me, I think. I would say not so much in the physical world, but more so in an inner world, which isn't unusual. Over the last couple of years, there has been a lot more inner activity, even though my physical world personally and just generally has changed dramatically, I would say. I think I'm facing challenges for one, I never thought I would face. On the other hand, um, I'm not sure how to put this. It's like it's like feeling I've been served something on a plate that I can't refuse to deal with. Like I've been served, I've been dealt a set of cards, whichever way you want to put it, and I need to deal with it. And but it's opening interesting doors in many ways. It's um, okay. I'll get to what I'm noodling on, and I'm just ad-libbing all of this. I haven't thought about it too much in terms of making a video, but I'll just sort of spell it out. Um, Let me see. I've been catching up on an interesting fellow called Howdy McCoskey. And Howdy McCoskey is a very interesting fellow. I came across him in some research I was doing on the Cathars. I had known about the Cathars as being an unusual bunch of people, no, let's not say Christian, but there is a Christian aspect to the Cathars who were persecuted by the Vatican for having ideas contrary to dogma. Now, this, of course, when you challenge the ideas that are considered to be sacrosanct and etched in stone, the tablets, there can be quite a backlash. And I think the backlash was severe in the case of the Cathars, who were fundamentally destroyed, eliminated, murdered by this degenerate, barbaric bunch who cannot have any opinion other than their own, coexist with anyone. Which makes me wonder, too, that what is apparently so much in opposition, let's say a Muslim Buddhist view compared to the Roman Catholic view, you'd think they'd go out and, well, they did the Crusades. They were attempting to cleanse the Holy Land. They gave it a shot. But in essence, there is a coexistence there for some reason. But the Cathars were particularly problematic for the Catholics because they presented a view that was intolerable. And the famous story is this Benedictine, I think he was a Benedictine monk, soldier, uh, a disgrace of a human being who was leading an army to destroy the Cathars, and apparently in Béziers in the south of France, I think it's the south of France, which was a town of about 30,000 at the time, I think around 1321, somewhere in there. He was at the gates of Béziers, 30,000 people, and Béziers was very fond of their Cathar community, which amounted apparently around 200, 300 Cathars were living peacefully with the Béziers community of 30,000 people. So this guy called Amalric, who was the general, Catholic general, stood in the gates and said, listen, give us the Cathars and we'll leave you alone. And the Béziers amazingly said, no, we're not going to let you murder these people. They're wonderful people. Fuck off, go away. And Amalric gave an order to his soldiers. I guess he had a superior army, or they were undefendable, or the Béziers was not a good fortress or whatever. So he gave his soldier the order to kill everybody, all 30,000 people, to get the 200 or 300 Cathars. And some of the soldiers were kind of perplexed by this. I guess they had a conscience, and being Christians, they said, well, you know what? That doesn't seem right to kill innocent people, And Amalric said, don't worry about it. God will sort it out on the other side of eternity. He will choose who is going to enter the pearly gates or not. So let God sort it out afterwards. Anyway, depraved, totally sickening. I mean, any relatively normal human being would be disgusted with this. Okay, this was a bit of a sideline. I had done some research on the Cathars for a show I did that I called The Soldier Show. And in the Soldier Show, I came across this genocide against this group of people in the 11th, 12th, 13th century. So I'd known about it, but I got a little bit more detail of it from this Howie Mikoski, who did an excellent basic synopsis. All right, here is the curious sort of evolution of my inner world, things changing, evolving, and fundamentally, what uh, what I find to be of real value, what I find to be worth noodling on, considering uh, the difficulties or challenges that I'm facing in a world that has not made sense, especially since the shit show. If you look at what uh, 80% of the population took some miserable toxic shit juice into their veins to satisfy an oligarchy who insisted that they should be injected with this shit juice, shit show and shit juice, and suffering for it. And apparently, the unexplained deaths are mounting. So there is a real disconnect here on on a massive scale. Okay, whoever is not capable of understanding this, go somewhere else, because the shit show happened. It definitively showed how dysfunctional people's brains are. Is what they consider to be science was out the window. Well, science hasn't really existed for a long time. I don't. It may have existed in some version, maybe early on, pre-Renaissance times. That's when everything started getting a bit wonky around the Renaissance, which is an unpleasant period to say the least, with the exception of a few people that were extraordinary. One of them being Michelangelo. Um, but well, can that period be redeemed by one single person? Uh, yeah, Bellini. Uh, I don't know. Anyway, here's my point. Eh. Here's my point. That there is a very clear indication for me that the world as it exists out there, I have always felt resistant to accepting consensual view, dogmas, things that I'm told that don't make sense necessarily, or if I haven't even thought about it that much, still don't make sense. And there is an obligation every human being has, given the ability to noodle on things and digest stuff. There is an obligation, as far as I'm concerned, for a human being to seriously consider the possibilities that there are people out there who don't have our interests at heart and who try to manipulate and fuck us over, quite frankly. And this is what happened during the shit show very clearly. So it's even more of a prerogative for each human being that has, as I say, a conscience, to do the right thing, to be on the right side of things, to noodle on these things. And one of the things that this Howdy, I'm a little bit disturbed by the name Howdy. It's like howdy doody. It's like you're supposed to laugh. It's like, or be, well, who's that puppet, right? That ventriloquist puppet. Kind of curious that his name would be Howdy. And nonetheless, I find him very interesting in his approach to how the world works. Oh, my pigeons just came back. They've been in my attic and they're looking. Let's see if I can show you my pigeons. See it? See it out there sitting? they're flying outside my window, and they're confused because they used to they used to be up in the attic, and then the landlord closed their holes, but they can't release themselves from their nuptial grounds. Look at them. Yeah. Gone they are. Okay. No, won't let you back in. Anyway, there's my pigeons. So whatever his name is, I like what I like, I like what he's proposing. And in essence, what he's proposing is that the world is a simulation. Of course, there are many reveals in terms of stories and what we consider to be Hollywood fantasies like The Matrix. He refers to The Matrix quite often, which may be a very apropos metaphor in terms of energies that this now becomes much more esoteric. That when we look at this, the physical world is tied to an extended existence through its energy and essence. What that is problematic because yes, we can sense energies, different types of energies. You put your finger in a socket and you get zapped. I mean, you can feel different levels of energy. It's possibly a spectrum even when you look at light, visible light, things that we don't see is much more than what we see. The electromagnetic spectrum. So there are energies, but I'm even thinking energies even more than what is measurable with instruments or tools we might have available to identify these energies. Now, Howdy suggests that there is an essence to a human being, an essence that is aside even from what we might call a soul. And a soul is that entity that persists, something that is a continuous, something of a continuous nature. A soul has a continuous nature. It's not the prerequisite of a reality the way we experience is not necessary for the soul, which is why I say eternity is an interesting element for me. As I say, I have a romance with eternity, which is why I make paintings. That eternity is more relevant to the soul even than the reality we exist in. I'll just propose that. However, Howdy suggests that there is an essence besides the soul that joins with the soul in order for us to be able to exist in this iteration. Possibly, as he says, a simulation. Now, here's where I can give, from an emotional point of view and intellectual point of view, proof that the earth that we experience, the reality, the existence we experience, is certainly not what it appears to be in the sense of what we are told through dogma, teaching. All the institutions of fucked up shit that they give us, that they serve us on a plate every day. And I'll just sort of indicate, and this is in my research when I did the Soldier Show, that cumulative history on whatever is recorded, however long you want to go back, 6,000 years, 30,000 years, well, there is nothing past supposedly 6,000 years, Egyptian history, that sort of Sumerian and early stuff. So let's just argument sake 6,000 years. The earth, as it is in terms of you and me, human beings, has been in turmoil, strife, war, killing, mayhem for always other than cumulatively, historically, about 265 years. So cumulatively, there has been peace among people for less than 260 years cumulatively, and the rest of time, the 5,740 years, whatever long, have been mayhem, murder, killing. So just that fact alone, we're given this information, okay? It's not hidden from us. This is real. So My contention is that the essence, the soul that in that makes up a human being is complemented for whatever reason by what I call a conscience, which wants you to be on the right side of things. This is the nature of our being. And I must say that most people I meet within their flaws are decent. I have not met very many psychopaths. I see them functioning out there. I mean, that political realm is all psychotic, or the Hollywood realm, the stars, the people that we're supposed to look up to, the clergy, all the people stuck in dogma. But you still only have, let's say, I would say maybe 20%, if you want to take it a lot, are psychotic. And even they have a sense of themselves as being on the right side of things, but find excuses not to do what it is that puts them on the right side of things in their choices and their decisions. So I'll just venture and say that 80% of the population is decent. I mean, within the realm of doing the right thing. We're always growing. I mean, I work on it as best I can. I want to do the right thing. When I make a mistake, I try to correct it and set it right, if at all possible. And this makes me feel I have a faith in humanity and people generally. So, and people may come up with many different explanations on why this isn't functioning properly. This, what I consider to be a conscience, active in 80% or more of the population, with a small group of people being psychotic. They don't give a shit. They'll do whatever and direct the herd, possibly, whatever you want to come up with. I still find this quite difficult to accept, that within this reality, that if 80% of living souls, breathing living souls, are somehow caught in this vicious cycle of suffering. And it says to me, it cannot be real. Whatever it is that we are witnessing in terms of the depravity, the level of depravity, if you look at historically, and we have, yes, we have enclaves and pockets of wonderfulness. Look at the magnificent art, the music that's created. We sit back, we listen to a Bach cantata, or we listen to our favorite musician, whoever that might be. It gives us a feeling, an uplifting feeling. I'm talking about a very high level of not just making a song that sounds good, but something that literally touches us deeply, something that is part of our soul that can be rattled on a very deep, fundamental level that makes us feel magnificently wonderful. Okay, so I'm not talking just about these enclaves, which end up actually being very seductive to make us think that everything is basically okay when it's not. Or at least makes me say, I need to wonder why things are the way they are, considering the potential we are served of being enlightened even. Like to have that higher level of connection with what it is that makes us feel good and want to propagate that, make everything around us more and more and more like that. But the opposite happens. Even when, the archetypal story about people going to church on Sunday, and they go through this pathetic ritual, and they walk out and they want to knob the neighbor's wife. It's like the only reason they went, they look pious and fantastic, and then the rest of the week they're trying to undermine the guy that was sitting next to him, if you know what I mean. They're going to do some nasty stuff to people and then go to church and have this sort of pretense. It's a nice example of how things work, generally speaking. Because if they were all like, how many hundreds of millions of Christians and Catholics, the world should be a fucking enlightened place based on the rules that they're supposed to follow, but they don't. So what is breaking down within the system of, oh yeah, it's all the tablets come down from the mountain and we have all the rules in the right place, but nothing works. If you know what I mean, it's not working. So proof that Howdy is right, I'm saying, is that it should be the opposite to what it is, which makes me conclude that the world is not just what it appears to be, but the world is actually, now I'll introduce his version of this, which is a possibility, that the idea of the archon, or these parasitic non-material entities, which I have actually had encounters in a dream, coming out of a dream. I've had visions, and people have visions, and I've had some recent ones of very dubious kind of characters hanging around. So there is a possibility that there is a connection, that we can literally visualize or have some sense of the reality of these, as he calls, archons, intruding themselves on our life. Now, his conclusion is the reason this simulation is in place in the first, to begin with, is the demiurge. The demiurge idea is that a being other than the omnipotent being, this could be a whole other discussion. The omnipotent being is complemented by a subservient being called the demiurge, who creates reality. Reality as we experience. Existence as human bags of blood, a pile of bones, meat suits, whatever you want to call it. This reality was created by a subservient omnipotence of some kind. Incredibly complex, magnificent. And even from the point of view that people, I look outside, now you saw my pigeons, the structures around us are so magnificent, mysterious, complex, that how could this be bad in any way? Well, in essence, it should be magnificent, but it's not. And as long as there is a suffering individual, that we could make a difference to make that life better, it's not going to, I won't be on the right side of things. This is a very difficult challenge. Like, as long as we can truly feel this connection to all life, and if there is a suffering going on, it's in a sense a kind of communal collective consciousness that I can't say I've tapped into it, but I imagine it's there, and as long as there's suffering, it's bad for me as well. This is not something I gotta noodle this a little more, because I think we're connected. It's not just isolated souls and this individuality sense of thing, and aloneness doesn't make sense in many ways, okay? I'll have to come back to this. But let me just sort of conclude and definitively articulate what I have come to understand from I've been somewhat inspired by this Howdy to think in these terms and to try to figure out why it seems right. And I've given you the reason why I think this world is not what we think it is on many levels, in the sense that the suffering, the difficulties that we face when we become flesh far exceed the nature I feel within myself and other fellow human beings, meaning manipulation. Now, we know all the manipulation from, the surveillance, MK Ultra, the kind of propaganda. You look at Goebbels, you look at all the masters of seduction that exist around us, from pleasure to pain, everything, there is manipulation. This is an indictment on this experience, because why does anyone need to manipulate anyone else in order to find satisfaction in their existence? Well, you say they want to control things. All right, that makes sense. Having control. What kind of cooties do you have after having controlled everything and then you die? What's the point of that? Or accumulating great wealth. Like, who did I hear this from? Don't pursue your profits into death. I mean, there's no point to it, right? In the sense that no one has ever returned, as far as I can prove or know. No one has ever come back with a memory. There is like a memory wash, if there is this reincarnation cycle, definitely I would agree there is a loss of memory of anything before for whatever reason. Okay? Unless somebody knows somebody who's come back and says, yeah, I remember doing this. And then how do you prove that? Well, you can claim anything you want. There appears to be some memory wipe going on in order for this simulation, let me call it that for now because it's a good word. In order for the simulation to continue, there needs to be a memory wipe. So what I'm saying, okay, where does this lead now? Where does this conclusion that not only did I understand the world is not what it appears to be, based on very solid evidence in terms of manipulation, but then this escalates, translates into some very nefarious, dark aspects of our nature, how we are being manipulated on a level that is past technological advances, which the bastards have, and surveillance and all this shit, and MK Ultra and mind manipulation, all that. I'm saying those are agents or just spooks for the real spooks, which are entities that feed on our energies on some level. This makes sense because it's not just human beings wanting to be shitty, delighting in the misfortunes of others, as I've said quite often, but this is on a far grander scale that, considering that human beings are decent, unless you can show me otherwise, because most people that I meet are decent people. In harsh, difficult circumstances, they may choose badly, but I'm saying that the essence of a human being is decent. That's my experience. So it introduces the possibility of this, Howdy introduces the possibility of what he calls the archons, these demiurge entities somehow attempting to undermine us in order to have this existence, which is why? Why does this need to exist in the first place? Let's say if there was some sort of overall balance in the nature of everything, why would we need a reality like this? I'm just sort of continuing my thought process here. Ultimately, this, why would there be a fallen thing? Why would there be like a demiurge in the first place, right? Well, some have explained this curious anomaly, which it is, that there is a desire within this omnipotent consciousness to experience and explore. And whether or not suffering in the sense of eternity is what you and I experience when we hurt ourselves or when we're stuck in some experience that's very painful, it may not have the same kind of weight within eternity. It's possible. It's not the same thing. So there is a kind of curiosity attached to, as Howdy says, the essence and a soul joining. And you'd have to, I'll keep a link, I'll put a link under here to his channel because he's very good at having gone through a lot of this material and presenting possibilities of what he believes to be operative in our experience in reality, and even some possible solutions to exiting the reality. And he insists that there is a cycle, this reincarnation idea is a cycle of the demiurge creation being satisfied. It's not something that is for us, but it's for this reality, which is not what we think it is. So it's not for us to learn anything, as he says, but to satisfy the urge and depravity. In my mind, why do you want to make a being suffer? He says because these entities get a lot of energy from the suffering, possibly the good stuff too when you're elated or whatever, but mostly from the suffering, I would imagine. Okay, how do I wrap this up? um, there are so many levels of understanding that can be applied to this and pursuing. Okay, the idea, I'll finish here, I think. He had the idea that this cycle, this returning cycle, is continuous, and we need to break it. As human beings, when we no longer breathe and live, um, that and just because we no longer live doesn't mean everything goes hunky-dory. He says that there is a requirement for us to be able to prepare ourselves to be outside of this cycle. So while some people may say, well, I like my life on earth, it's fantastic. Okay, well, uh, maybe this is a decision that the soul makes in order to return. I myself, I am very grateful. I wake up. My prayer in the morning is fundamentally what he said too. This is great. I've said this before. My prayer in the morning, the first word that comes to mind is thank you. It's a kind of tribute to uh, the essence that I want to be connected to, the soul, the essence I want to be connected to, not some sort of, oh shit, I'm in the fucking shitter today again, or this and that, or whatever, and I'm going to just sort of rampage through the China shop and get satisfaction. No, my sense of being alive is connected very much to this short prayer called thank you. And I believe I'm making some progress in this. And healing is very much connected to this as well, meaning the balance, because illness represents an imbalance within us. And uh, he was mentioning that this Howdy, uh, since he has pursued this topic, there has been a great deal of difficulty in terms of his health. He's mentioned that he's had, like, for the last 25 years, he's had continuous cycles of afflictions, health afflictions, like physically. He's been having a lot of difficulties, which is interesting because if there are entities that don't want him to have any kind of impact on other souls, beings, humans, thoughts, minds, then you want to discourage somebody. That could be an explanation. It could make sense as well. But his idea is to break this cycle, we need to be prepared. We need to have um, some some form of insight that allows us to detach ourselves enough not to be seduced, that whatever we carry into eternity, there obviously is some residue, substantial, possibly, that continues to affect the soul to have the desire to return. And if it is a cycle of ultimately suffering in some version or other, sometimes more, sometimes less, it makes sense if there is a higher aspect to this. I don't even know if it's individual, like a soul is individual. I don't, this is so fascinating because we're always in this reality reminded of how separate everything is. And in another form of our existence, this separation may not exist except for the fact that we bring this out of this experience into eternity. And then our our the consequence of that is to be seduced to come return for whatever reason. So the preparation for this, I haven't really uh, I haven't really gotten a sense of what his solution is. Again, this is very personal as well. There are things that apply in a larger sense to human beings in general, and then there are things that only apply to a person individually. It's like the uh, the specificity of our creative side. And he said creativity and all that could be a seductive force working against us. Possibly. What I don't believe is working against us is conscience. This is the one stable factor. Even I would say that if a person is completely fully loving and everything, that could create a seductive feeling of loving thing, wanting to be here. Problematic. But conscience is outside of that for me because it wants you to be on the right side of things. It's one of the things that if the omnipotent being had it really together, he gave every soul the ability to be on the right side of things in some way, and that's conscience. So there are complex aspects to being fooled in this reality. One of them being that uh, even the things we believe that create detachment for ourselves may in fact be seductive and make us want to return. Um, and it's interesting, I'm just thinking that the Catholic Church, the Christian bunch, uh, tend to think of the finality, right? They say when you die, you're either in purgatory, hell, or heaven. Of course, as far as the demiurge uh, notion is concerned, this would be hell. The earth that we're living on, to a soul that is totally balanced and liberated, this would be hell. Okay, that's a kind of conclusion that if we follow this, if we follow this line of thinking, right, that this will actually be hell. The fact that the people you can least trust say that there's uh, they don't say there's nothing. They say that there is heaven, hell, and purgatory, but it's a finality in the sense that you don't come back, right? They don't want you to think that, oh yeah, you come back. The Buddhists do. Maybe they have a little bit more, there's a little more honor among Buddhists that they actually, and other religions that are convinced of this return cycle, that give us an opportunity to at least consider this. But this depraved bunch, this Catholic, Christian, Jewish, I don't know, the Jewish guys are just fucked in the head totally. I mean that entire Hebrew scripture shit is like totally convoluted. I studied some of that stuff. It's just fucking brutal. Now there are reveals in it. There is obvious uh, there are things that make sense in it, in the sense of a reveal, but the fundamental nature of it is this fucked up Yahweh character, this Adonai, this being that cannot be mentioned, he that is not mentioned, is a scourge. It's brutal. So to attach oneself to this sort of history of suffering through scriptures is even worse, in a sense, than being fooled by it. I don't know if that makes sense. Okay, so um, let's the positive side to this. There is a resolution, the potential for a resolution without being seduced into lies and obfuscations and many levels, that matrix idea, the many levels. And whenever you come to a realization as something falls apart and you're back on square one and all this kind of thing. What needs to, here's how I approach this now. Okay, I'll end it here. That in order uh, there are fundamental attitudes that must be maintained. And I have a hard time with this, quite frankly, because my emotions surface very quickly about different things. Again, this parasitic whatever it is feeds on it, and I'm sort of stuck. I need to be able to detach myself from those emotions. The Cathars were all about this, not to be in this world. They were saying you need to be outside of this world, and they used the idea of the Jesus character. They even proposed some weird sort of holographic image, because as long as you're of this flesh in some way, you are seduced by it. That was their notion. And in order to escape this cycle, you needed to detach yourself in a fundamental way. I guess somehow or other it's possible, because there have been beings called the Cathars, for example, maybe others, who insisted that it is possible. So there is hope. If you're thinking along these lines, if you're not thinking along these lines, it's all like Swahili to you. None of this will make sense. There has to be a fundamental uh, mind meld, in a sense, about what it is that we're facing in the bigger picture and what it means to have a soul, what it means to have an essence that is continuous in what I call eternity. So, anyway, an update, and I think it's related. The reason I'm doing this too is because I believe it's related to my own healing, my physical healing, that is a work in progress, I have to say. Like I say, I have good days and I have bad days. And there are complications. And another interesting thing that Howdy mentioned is over his period of 20 some years of illnesses, and he isn't that old. I would say he's maybe in his mid 50s. So he's been struggling from the time he was 30 with different illnesses since he's been dealing with the subject. That he has come across many people who are healers that have had very little effect or no effect. That's what he says. And it may be a reflection on him as much as the people that he finds, that there is no balance in us unless we're ready to be balanced, unless we are able to extend, to have some ability to literally extend ourselves out of this dimension in order for us to have influence on this physical being, like in a real way. I mean, you can fast. I fast occasionally. I eat what I eat as clean as I possibly can. I attempt to stay away from the toxic side of life. I don't drink anymore. No smoking, drinking, any of that stuff. Of course, those are fundamentals. But beyond that, I think there is as much as illness is a reflection of a toxicity, there's also an emotional toxicity that needs to be cleansed. And this is, I think the reason I'm talking about this is because I'm making that connection now, that it's not just finding healers, people that can help, but also becoming one's own healer. That, yeah, I think, and this is something I'm going to noodle on more. I'm actually, I've found a person that has, I call a healer. She's special. She has a quality that's special, but she also struggles. And I think what's happening in my relationship, we're becoming friends, and in a sense, we're helping each other. And I think this is when healers are most effective, is that when there is when there is like an exchange of some kind that happens, and it changes you as a person and changes them as a person as well. It's not just sort of like you step out there. It would be nice to have that silver bullet that fixes everything. But for most of us, I don't think it works that way. Maybe for some it does, but that may again be something that happens from within rather than from without. So, yeah, as this Jesus character said, the kingdom of heaven is within. Very important. Anyway, I'll leave it here. I'll put a link on the bottom for Howdy's stuff. Very interesting, especially in the Cathars. I'll put that link and then you can pursue his other thoughts and ideas. Anyway, 44 minutes. Quite a long time. All the best to all of you.